fear through Killarney. Now I'm back to hit you with a win. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Disciples Ed here on the Always Next Year Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rob, joined tonight by Joe. How you doing, Borek?
Doing well. It helps, even though it was ugly as hell, that the Flyers were able to win coming into this one, and the Phantoms, who I cover for the Great Flyers Nitty Gritty, are looking good. So at least those keep my spirits up. So, and whenever I bet on them, the Hawks continue to still help my checkbook. So I have something to keep my spirits up through the Flyers' struggles here.
Well, as you said, it was ugly last night. A come from behind 4-3 overtime win, down 3-0 in the third period. Came back with 3 to tie it, won it on the Provorov game winner in overtime. But just like everything else that's been going on in the Flyers world of late, it was ugly. It was not inspiring. They did it against the worst team in the NHL without their best player. And coming up, it doesn't get any easier because they've got one more against Buffalo tomorrow night, or tonight, depending on when you read this, because we'll be releasing it tomorrow morning. They've got one on the road at the Islanders. Got 2 at home and home with Boston. Got another one with the Islanders on the road. And then they've got Boston again. And it continues after that. They got some games with Washington and Pittsburgh, and the Rangers have played them tough. And, you know, it's a tough schedule coming up in April for the Flyers, and they're currently sitting 3 points out of the 4th spot in the East Division. They're 3 points behind Boston, but the problem there is that Boston has 3 games in hand on them. So the Flyers, they have their work cut out for them. I think the season has kind of gone the opposite of what a lot of people were expecting. I think a lot of people are expecting the Flyers to be close to the top of the division, and the Penguins to be, you know, maybe the odd team out with some of the players that they lost and not making notable improvements over the offseason. But it's quite the opposite. The Penguins are on a roll right now. They're pretty securely in a playoff spot, and the Flyers are kind of fighting for their life to stay in the mix of things. So we'll take a look at these last couple games. Yes, they were wins, but they were ugly. Borek, what's your takeaway from these last 2 games? Can this be what gets the Flyers going down the stretch?
I mean, they found ways to win. I wouldn't, like you said, I would say they were pretty ugly wins. I mean, I thought in the New York game, they had 25 shots on net to our 37. We pressured them fairly well, and then Shesterkin obviously made some big saves to keep them in that game. That probably could have been a little bit more spaced out than a 2-1 game. And then Moose also looked good. That was one of the only games. Recently, though, we really looked thoroughly, actually pretty solid, in my opinion, because yesterday you have no excuse. Like, I was finally happy with how G reacted after a win, where Ghost reacted like that, who we'll get back to later after a performance last week, getting pissed off and saying how embarrassing it is. Now G reacted after a win, saying how embarrassing it is, when last week I thought he was too tempered. So I'd like to actually really see that from the captain, but you have no excuse to go down 3-0 against a team that is on a 17 game, about to tie the record for a losing skid. So, and the team recognizes that. So I'm happy they recognize that. I don't think I see these as games to prove you're sending it in the right direction, because only in one of these 2 games did you actually play really well. You shouldn't have to have a second period that you looked better in and then a great third period to beat Buffalo. You should just be able to come out good against Buffalo. So that's why this game was like a mix of emotions. It's great they won. The play by Voracek off the boards from Couturier to Giroux was really nice. But there's a lot of negatives in that, where I wouldn't say these games prove we're moving in the right direction. It just proves that the Flyers maybe can find ways to win again and still need to work on a lot to move in the right direction. Because, like I said on my video I did for my Sports Fanatic news page earlier, you're not beating any other team other than the Sabres with how you played yesterday. Maybe the Devils, but like you're not beating many other teams with how you played the Sabres yesterday. So they still got to wise up a lot, in my opinion.
Right, and hey, last time they played the Sabres about 3 weeks ago in Philadelphia too, it was the same kind of deal. The Flyers were down, I believe it was either 3-1 or 4-2 in that game. They had to come back and scratch and claw for a shootout win in that one. So not exactly impressive stuff going against the worst
It was
team in the
3-1. I
NHL.
just went back and looked for it. It was 3-1. They came back in that game.
So yeah, the last two times they've played the worst team in the NHL, they've been in a deep hole and they've had to come back and win those games. And that kind of hockey, yeah, you might be able to do it against a team like Buffalo. You're not going to be able to do it against a team like Boston or Pittsburgh or Washington. And those are the kind of teams that the Flyers can be facing here in April. So yeah, changes clearly do need to be made. They did make one today. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But and the win against the Rangers, yes, they looked a little bit more sound defensively. Brian Elliott looked a little bit better between the pipes. Sam Morin getting his first career NHL goal in a timely fashion, the game winner on Saturday. So really good to see that happen.
That was
Really,
great to see.
really
Yeah,
happy for Sam Morin there.
That was
Yes.
great to see, though, just as a quick aside, because he's been fighting two big leg injuries, other injuries since 2018. He came back, really kicked ass. In Lehigh when going back to defense. Scott Gordon praised him mightily, and you really have to give a lot to Scott Gordon to say he should go back to defense. And now that started to work out in Big Tenfold, and Road Truck said this about Moore, who obviously is the radio announcer, really pays attention to the Phantoms year to year. He's looked the best he's ever looked since coming back from this injury and really working hard at his craft since coming back. So if that remains the same, we actually found one defensive defenseman, even though he scored the winning goal. He is a defensive defenseman. And now you need to add one other guy, and then you should be in better order for your defense, at least.
Yeah, it's good to see Sam Morin coming up and playing well, and as you said, fulfilling at least a little bit of that need in terms of the defensive defenseman that they need to shore up that defense there. I want to talk a little bit about the goaltending situation right now. In the last couple of games, 2 wins, both with Brian Elliott between the pipes. Do you think that this is a move made by Alain Vigneault to kind of, maybe settle down Carter Hart a little bit, maybe get him a chance to see things from a different perspective from the bench as opposed to being in-game action? Or do you think it's just, riding the, I don't want to say hot, but less cold hand, trying to scrape together some wins as they reach the stretch here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Elliott's been better throughout the year. His stats have went down. I would say Hart's obviously, like he's admitted himself, struggled in general and hasn't got help by the defense. Where Elliott's stats, I think, more so have gone down, mostly because the defense just flat out leaves Mika Zibanejad or other said people wide open in front of the net like it's their job, which is the exact opposite of their job. So that's an issue. But I think Moose, it makes sense to go with, because I also read a thing today which I didn't realize until reading it. Hart, I don't know for whatever reason, because it was when I was looking at on a podcast, I got the alert, but the alert said he broke from a sports psychologist. So maybe now he needs to find a new person, someone he can kind of talk to like he had before, that can kind of help him with the mental side of the game. Because especially with the goaltenders, the most pivotal position, it's like you see with pitchers in baseball sometimes, being the guy, the center of attention on the mound, goaltender, the center of attention stopping the puck. You need to have somebody to go to when needed. That's not just your backup goaltender, obviously, like someone away from the team. So I think when he finds that, that'll help. But I think just a week to himself to work on his craft and just kind of mentally reset is exactly what Carter Hart needed. And Alain Vigneault's trying to also, with Fletcher, push this team to say, look, if you guys can't beat the Sabres without Carter Hart, then that's pathetic. You guys really need to step up around him. Like Ghost said last week, it's embarrassing how they're leaving their goaltenders out to dry. It was nice to finally hear somebody say that. they can't keep doing that. And I think it's good to have a mental reset. He's a young kid. He was struggling. And on top of that, has one of the most worst performing defenses in front of him in the month of March. I don't think 2 and 2 go together. So I think it was very smart to rest him. I feel like Hart's definitely going to come back. Ghost said it before we're going to put on waivers. G, others have come out in support of him, knowing his work ethic's there. And I think that's first and foremost what matters. If you're somebody that has the great work ethic that keeps working at it, you'll always get there. If you're somebody that's kind of a basket case and head case, that's more when it's questionable. But Hart's not that. So that's why I believe in him getting back to where he was eventually, but it's also going to take the defense from the forward position to the defense to not suck, to actually have that help out in general. But I will say, Alex Lyon, after not playing for 365 days, they must have telepathically heard us, Rob, played in 3 out of 4 nights.
I guess they did.
And, yeah, and the one game was just weird because Hershey got no shots on, and then it was literally like the song shots, 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 everybody in the rest of the game. And that screwed Lions' mojo in that game. But then he beat Binghamton in back-to-back games after not playing for 365 days. So other than that one period he played, that's not really counted before it got canceled against Binghamton also. And he looked good in both games. So he stepped up for us at different times against Boston in the past and Avs. I wouldn't be surprised if they also put him in on Wednesday, which was one of the rumors. He hasn't committed to anybody and said it could be either or. Because you just want to spark this team with anything. And they know with the backup goalies, normally from watching around the NHL, when you put your backup in, that kind of makes your defense play better regardless because they know it's not their starter in net. It's just kind of a psyche thing. So it's also smart to try to get the defense going, give Hart this week to relax, and maybe give Lyon some NHL action because if you get him going in a couple games or one game in the NHL, you now kind of more solidify your third string, which I think, in my opinion, is already solidified, but just to people that still doubt him. So it's a beneficial in kind of all facets, I think, to give Hart this week to reset. It helps the defense to try to up the ante, saying you need to perform now in front of these guys that are still good, but not Carter Hart when at his best. And it kind of just lets Hart reset and become kind of his true self again and maybe find a new person to talk to about things he has to get through in the everyday grind of the NHL season.
Right. And going back to the point you made about the new sports psychologist, I think there is a lot to that because we've seen in the past, we saw it last season where Carter Hart would go out there and he would have a bad performance, and then the next night he would bounce back and he would be excellent. And he wouldn't let the bad performances snowball quite the way that he has this season. Whereas this year, it's letting up 4 goals one night turns into letting 5 goals in the next night. And it has seemingly gotten worse as the season has gone along. And he reached the point where in that 9-0 game against the Rangers, he just looked completely non-competitive even on some of the goals that he let in. And I think that is a mental thing. And I think that could very well potentially go back to the sports psychologist. Maybe, the guy's just, he's not giving the right advice. He's not giving him the right advice.
Well, now what it was is
he
got rid of his sports psychologist is what I read from it, which he detached from him was the headline I read. So I don't think he's had him for a bit now. I don't know what made them disconnect originally, but like you said, something must have made a disconnect happen to make them split. And I don't think he's ever found anybody to fill that void. So.
Oh, so, okay. That's my fault there. I thought you meant that he disconnected from him and went with another guy.
No, I don't think he went. From what I've read, it sounded like he just disconnected from him right now because like I said, I was on a podcast. I was only able to skim it when a headline popped up, but it said he disconnected from a sports psychologist, and the person was spinning it in the sense of this could be why we're seeing some struggles in him this year. So I took that as I think he's still looking for somebody else to fill that void of him cutting the old person out. And if that's the case, one, having a week to do that is plenty of time, so maybe you find somebody, but two, having a week to yourself is also good to have at times when you're kind of going through stuff to just kind of watch the boys and study game tape and just kind of get back to working on your craft almost like before the season, having like a week, like one extra week to kind of just reset and prep like you do almost preseason wise to just focus and hone in entirely on your craft and watch film like AV and the coaching staff said he's going to be doing and working on a lot in practice and all these drills and stuff. So,
Okay, well, with that being the case, you kind of got to wonder, since he disconnected with his sports psychiatrist and now he's having such a terrible season, is there something more going on, with him mentally? Is there something, beyond sports even that's bothering him, that's taking his mind off of what's going on the ice? And we can only speculate right now, and really we shouldn't speculate
yeah, it's
in a
tough
situation
to say
like
that
that.
because I don't like I don't like speculate. That's what I was going to say. I don't like speculating on guys like that because we saw like Connor Ingram with Nashville, Jacob Ingram's brothers, who are both goalies, so they make it easy to remember them. Is in the protocol, and then Bobby Ryan was in it. We saw him come out and have good stuff from coming out of it, as well as I'm blanking on the defenseman, but the one guy that was in Dallas was in it as well and had success coming out of the new NHL protocol to take care of it. So yeah, I don't really like speculating with that stuff, but I think the NHL has set up a pretty good protocol now for people if they do eventually need the aid from everybody, psychiatrists from that the league can recommend and all that, because it's helped guys like Bobby Ryan and others already. So.
Yeah, and keeping him in the goaltending position, even Robin Leonard has benefited from it as well.
That's true. Leonard's a big name. Yeah, he's a big name guy that benefited from it. You're right.
Absolutely. Well, Carter Hart obviously making the changes there and hopefully able to make some changes back in the right direction in regards to his situation with the sports psychiatrist there, and we wish him all the best with that. Speaking of changes, though, a big change made by the Philadelphia Flyers today, and we kind of hinted at it earlier on in the podcast. I'm sure you've all heard of it by now by the time that you listen to this. Shayne Gostisbehere put on waivers. Now, he has a $4.5 million cap hit, and with the flat cap, because of the COVID situation, it maybe lessens the chance a little bit that a team will claim him, and maybe he will end up back with the Flyers, or maybe he'll end up on the taxi squad. Who knows what will happen there. But, Borek, what do you make of this news, putting Ghost on waivers?
To me, it's just weird timing, I think is the phrase I used when I did my video earlier too, because I understand like it was weird when you benched Ghost too, because I thought before he got benched this season was actually when he kind of went into his little struggle bunny zone again and then got out of it. And then when he was getting out of it for a couple games, you benched him. So like that for Gus too. So that's why that was weird. And then now that Morin's come up, I remember reading articles in 2018 before Morin went down. I don't know if you remember this, but they even brought it up on the one telecast. This was a line that people envisioned because Morin's a defensive defenseman that's a massive force on the ice. And then you have Ghost who likes moving in on the offense that people kind of envision happening. It's looked pretty good for 3 games. Hell, in the game you sucked against New York, your best graded defensive line was Morin in his first game back up with Gostisbehere. So I feel like the timing just doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense for me because you need all the help you can get back on defense. I realize you need defensive defenseman people, but you don't have anybody to call up that's a defensive defenseman if Ghost gets claimed to fill in his spot. Prosser's been doing terrible. Gus ain't a defensive defenseman. Derek Pouliot's been doing great in the minors. But here's another thing. He's not a defensive defenseman. So, like, if Ghost gets claimed, you don't have another defensive defenseman to fill in for him if that's your move. That's why I feel he had to be put on waivers for one or two reasons. To really spark and light a fire under the ass of the team to really show them, or because this team wants to do another move and are hoping he gets claimed because maybe they're going to go out and get 2 defensemen instead of 1 or something like that and need the cap space. Because otherwise the timing makes no sense. He's looked better. He's looked good with Morin. That's a line they envisioned before Morin had his injuries as well with Ghost. So I feel like the timing doesn't make much sense unless if there's a bigger move in the picture, or it's really just to light a fire under the guys' asses, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I kind of saw, attached to the news that happened today. I saw opinions that it's probably just to light a fire, and I kind of do agree with that. Maybe trying to catch the attention of some of the other defensemen. Like, hey, if you don't pick your game up and play to the level that we know that you're capable of, well, then shit's going to happen. You might get moved. Who knows? Yeah, it's just the timing is a little bit weird, but you know me.
Especially
I'm not,
after he's the one guy to call out people. Before G did yesterday after a winning effort, he
Yes.
did too. Where
Yeah,
I don't want to
after
get rid
it
of
was the
someone.
6-1 game, or was it the 8-3 game?
I think it was the 8-3 game, but either way, last week, Ghost called out the team, and rightfully so, where he's been around. I think it's underrated, even when guys aren't as good as they once were for your team. If they've been around the locker room, you automatically become a staple and a leader. Him saying that probably has some merit to people stepping up, and now you have G say it, so you know he agreed with them. Due to that, too, not just the way he's playing, the timing seems odd. You're getting rid of someone it seems like the guy and the bunch kind of likes in the locker room.
Yeah, I don't know what the situation is there, but yes, he did come up and say it. And to be honest, I'm kind of disappointed with Giroux that he didn't say it earlier. I thought as the captain of the team, he should have been a little bit more forthcoming with that kind of an opinion and not waiting until after Gostisbehere said it to kind of echo the same sentiments. But yeah, the timing of this is a little bit weird. You guys, all you listeners out there, I'm not the biggest Ghost fan in the world, so I'm not totally opposed to him being put on waivers, and I think that maybe it'll give a chance for maybe Sam Morin will get more playing time, maybe Haig will get more playing time. One of those guys a little bit more defensively
But we
responsible,
need
and
Haig
that
to
could be
come
a big
back,
thing.
too. That's why the timing's weird, because we have to remember Robert Haig is still injured, where if he wasn't injured, then the timing might make more sense to me because of what you just said. Then we would have a defensive defenseman that's able to enter in if you want to have a more defensive defense. But because that's not the case currently, that's why the timing still makes no sense to me.
Yes, and I'm looking it up. Hag's injury was suffered in a 9-0 game, and at that point was estimated to be 2 to 4 weeks. So his return to the lineup could be coming up soon.
Cap
Maybe
Friendly
within the next few
says
days or so.
yeah, Cap Friendly still has his expected duration as, because wasn't that 9-0 game recently? So if it was a couple weeks, it would still be like 2 to 3 weeks, because that's what this that could be wrong, but that's what this has when I scroll over it, where Frost says obviously indefinite, and then Ustamenko says 4 months, which was about correct. So I feel like that's probably right.
Yeah.
But
Yes. Either way, Hag will be returning from his injury. I think he'll probably be back in a week or two. So that might have something to do with it, although maybe a little bit earlier than expected. But yeah, it's a weird situation, and
especially because the big thing, I know I pointed this out in the video, and it's funny, Jamie texted me about it later, the great Jamie Pascal, but Florida lost Ekblad. Ghost is from Florida. So if you're trying to pull off a trade, or like have a trade where you want to lose Ghost so you have more cap freedom, the timing just seems suspect. Where
that's a
it's
really
like,
interesting. I didn't even think about that.
where it's kind of like, oh wait, Florida just lost Aaron Ekblad. If we put Gostisbehere on waivers right now, maybe Florida will take him, and then we could trade for Jomerson and somebody else rather than just Nicholas or something along those lines. That's why it's just the timing seems odd for play, but it also seems suspect for that end of things also.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that with Aaron Ekblad out long term. That was a gruesome injury. He had to be carted off the ice, unfortunately, and we wish him all the best in his recovery.
Dougie Hamilton reached out to him too, which was very good to see because we know he had a similar injury in past. Or it's either he reached out to him or had a quote to kind of so he would see it and it would be supportive of him. But either way, that's great to see from Dougie Hamilton, who went through a similar thing last year. So that's what I've always liked about the NHL. Like it's kind of like similar to baseball for like if someone gets a similar injury, or sometimes in like football, it'll be like,
Yeah.
like no, nobody really reaches out to other teams. So it's nice to have that communal help.
I think it's just a situation where the players are maybe a little bit more personable than they are, say, in football and basketball. But yeah, it's nice to see him reach out. Nice to see Dougie Hamilton reach out, and obviously we wish Aaron Ekblad all the best in his recovery. But I just maybe kind of wish that Chuck Fletcher had, had the mental capacity, I guess I should say, to see, okay, Florida's going to need someone to take Ekblad's spot in the lineup. Maybe we can go them into a trade for Gostisbehere and get something of value in return, as opposed to just placing him on waivers. And if Florida claims him, then we don't get anything other than the added cap space. So
yeah, well, we should have expected that, Rob, because he didn't have the mental capacity the last time when he put Friedman on waivers, knowing damn well that Ron Hextall just got hired as the GM of Pittsburgh and was clearly going to claim him. So
rumor has that Hextall already has a train ticket bought for Gostisbehere to go out there to Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if that would actually happen, but wouldn't surprise me one bit if it did happen. But anyway, with all this going on, as we mentioned, the Flyers 3 points out of a playoff spot, with Boston having 3 games in hand. They have 22 games remaining on the regular season schedule. Borek, what do you think their chances are of being able to sneak into the playoffs?
I think they're going to have to do something to provide a spark. Like I said, if the Ghost thing was to clear up space for cap trades, you'd probably figure out a way to get a trade done regardless. You're going to have to bring in defense to tighten up that defense. And with how guys are performing in the minors, Willman you can't call up to next year, but Lazinski's performing really well and played at Ohio State as a 6th-round pick. The team's at least still drafting well. Because if he comes up in his first year, that's great to see. He's been going off. He had 6 goals in the past week. Wisdom has looked good all season. You have to make the decision on the OHL. One of these guys, I think, just like Morin got called up. Fletcher said 2 weeks. Morin was called up less than 2 days later. I feel like Lazinski's a guy that's very soon close to getting the call up, and then Wisdom they have to make the decision on. Allison they'll probably try to get in the double digits games. He's only played 5 games yet, but he has an NHL ready shot already. I think you're going to need some young infusion because this team's lacked energy in the month of March a lot. Like you've seen guys get clocked on the ice, and we just have no response. Where I think having some young infusion, bringing in that energy, you'll see some guys like Raffle scratch sometimes. Lindblom's been more consistent now. Patty's looked better of late, but say he stays consistent, you might see him scratch some. Even though he scored a clutch goal yesterday, defensive numbers, Hayes looks bad this year, defensive numbers wise. He's a guy I think could sometimes use an ass kicking by a benching. So you would have the ability to do that when some young guys come up. I think those guys coming in might bring that energy the team needs, combined with guys you acquire at the deadline. That's, I think, what'll give you a chance. But it's going to be tough because you got to defend a lot tighter. And that's why I think you have to get someone like a Jomerson in order to kind of bring your defense together and then have these young guys come up to kind of bring that energy spark for you, more so at the forward position, because I think the defenseman that would be up is already up, and that's Samuel Morin, because the only other defenseman I see them calling up would be Pouliot, but he's an offensive defenseman who's doing really well for the Phantoms, but the Flyers don't need more offensive defensemen unless if they trade Ghost or Gus at the deadline. So it depends what they do with that. But I think you need a young infusion and you need to bring in the right people at the deadline. That's the only way I think this team's going to go in the right direction because their energy, I don't know if you agree with me, but in many games has looked pretty dull until some games recently at times in the month of March where it's still been overly dull, but you've seen some light at the end of the tunnel, I thought.
It has, yeah, and especially those blowout games, the 9-0 game, the 6-1 game against the Islanders, 8-3 game, where they fell behind by multiple goals early on. They just look completely disinterested from that point on. So that's got to change too. But the ball is in Chuck Fletcher's court. You mentioned it. We need that extra defenseman, whether it's Ekholm, whether it's Jalmerson. He needs to go out and get someone because this team's not going to win without that. And taking a look at their schedule going forward, I know we kind of looked at it a little bit, but they've got 3 games remaining with Boston. They've got 3 games, I believe, remaining with the Penguins. They've got 4 games remaining with the Washington Capitals, 3 of them on the road. And they've also got 3 games, with the New York Islanders, as well as the 3 games with Boston, who has dominated them all season long. So it's not an easy schedule. There are a lot of good teams, a lot of teams that are ahead of them in the standings, a lot of very competitive teams or a lot of games against very competitive teams, I should say, that they're going to have their work cut out for them. And especially those 3 Boston games, they need to win those if they want to keep pace with the Bruins for that 4th spot in the East Division. And if they continue, like they've gotten their ass handed to them on a silver platter by the Bruins all season, so they cannot continue to play the Bruins the same way that they have, because if they do, there's no way that they're going to snag that 4th spot from them. So they need to make changes. They need to add that extra defensive-minded defenseman, a veteran guy, hopefully, and hope that it works out for the best, because what they have right now, it's not going to cut it going down the stretch. So
yeah, and
if they want to make the playoffs, I think that they can if they make a change. But if they don't make a change, I don't think they have a chance.
No, yeah, I agree with you. That's what I was saying. I think they still need to make a change. And in terms of the team, though, as a whole, I think they've still been running the organization fairly well, other than incoming. It's kind of been the same as what's been the issue with Hextall, which is why we kind of got rid of him. They're still doing well. Willman got rewarded, got a 2-way contract. Logan Day got rewarded with an extension, maybe as a candidate in the future for a 2-way contract on defense, maybe next year if he keeps doing well. So they're doing the things well, like Hextall did. They're not necessarily filling in the gaps that we want them to fill in as quickly at the NHL level. And that was kind of, oddly enough, the same thing we sometimes complained about during the Hextall regimen. We liked how the organization was drafting in late rounds, picking some dudes up. We just didn't love how they were kind of positioning the NHL roster all the time. And it's weird how that's kind of the same thing right now, which I thought personally Fletcher would be better at doing. So I'm hoping he does that in these next coming weeks up until April 12th. But I do think Tanner Laczynski, he has 10 points in 13 games. I feel like and plays great defensively, already good at faceoffs for such a young kid as a rookie. He gets .77 points per game in the minors. I feel like he's right on the cusp. And Wisdom is a game time decision, because you got to let him go to the OHL, or you got to let him see what he can do in the NHL. Where Pouliot, I feel if he was on another team, he would probably have been called up because of how well he's looking in the minors. We just don't need more offensive defensemen. Unless if Ghost or Gus leave. If Gus leaves, which would be nice, hopefully, then
Steve's ears right there.
Then you could call up Pouliot, because he has 10 points in 13 games in the minors and is looking very good as a passing defenseman to really be a second power play guy, maybe if needed, which is what Pittsburgh thought he was going to be when they drafted him. So it would also be nice to find a late bloomer as a former Pittsburgh defenseman to piss off Pittsburgh fans. So.
Yeah, it's always fun to piss off the Pittsburgh fans, so it would be nice for that to happen as well. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to throw in here before we wrap this one up?
I think the final thoughts are pretty much obvious. You have to do exactly what Giroux finally came out and said, and I agree with you. He should have said it sooner. Ghost said it first, but play around your goaltending and let the defense, like I said in past podcasts, lead you to actually scoring, and the offense, because that's what good teams do. You see that out of the other great teams or the surprise teams, like even the Wild this year, create offense through some plays they make on defense or through momentum created by their goaltender, which is something the Flyers are obviously not able to capture this year either. So you need to have your goaltenders improve, especially Hart coming off of this week off when he comes back next week. We need to see the defense play more like it's played after the first period in these last two games, because in the second and third period they played better against Buffalo, and in the last game against the Rangers prior, they actually played a pretty good defensive game. If they can do that, especially like they played the Rangers is actually an opponent to base it off of, like they played against the Rangers, and move forward and have their defense play better from their forward position, that's the way this team will have a chance. But it's obviously exactly what guys are saying. Protect the damn goalie and play better defense, and have the forwards we expect to play defense finally play defense too, and not just be offensively productive.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. And it's a good point about the forwards, too. You mentioned Kevin Hayes earlier on, and he was so solid defensively last season, and he's been the exact opposite almost this year. The goal scoring's still there. The offensive stuff's still there. The defensive stuff has been the polar opposite of what he was last year. And that's been the case with some of the other forwards as well. Knack was, when he was in the lineup last season, was a very good defensive forward and hasn't quite been the same in that regard this year as well, just to name a few guys. But it really, you could say that about a lot of the guys who have been consistent parts of the lineup, and it needs to change because defense has been their downfall. And I think we saw it when they were winning last year. Good defense leads to better offense. You know, you break up possessions in a defensive end, you can lead to odd man rushes, you can spend more time on offense, and it all translates to winning. And so the Flyers, they need to shore things up defensively if they want that to translate into better results on the offensive end and also translate to wins. So yeah, they need to make improvements there, not only in terms of getting better personnel, but also the guys they have just playing better. So yeah, I certainly do agree with that. And my final thought here is I just want to give a shout out to Just Food. You can find them at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. If you're looking for food for any occasion, whether it's rage eating after another embarrassing Flyers loss, or, you know, anything you got a party you want to supply food for, they've got everything you want. Just Food, 215-794-3663. They're located in Buckingham Green in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. Their owner, Asian Rob, a good friend of the Always Next to Your Podcast Network. Check them out. Awesome stuff. I've never once complained about them. I've always had good things to say, and I will continue to have good things to say because their food is amazing. Once again, Just Food, 215-794-3663, 215-794-FOOD, located in Buckingham Green, Buckingham, PA. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Disciples of Ed, and we'll be back with another one next week.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.